right, it's Scott Penfold here with you, and welcome to the Loaded Radio podcast. Officially kicking off our second season of the Loaded Radio podcast, and it's an all-new, bigger and better podcast because, well, we've got bigger and better interviews as well, more content, more news. It's just going to be a bigger, fleshed-out podcast for you because we figured, you know what, we got so many interviews coming in lately, and when we dig doing them, why not? So here we go, season 2, the all-new Loaded Radio podcast. It's bigger and better for you. Okay, so yeah, let's not waste time. No, get down to it. This week on the podcast, talking to the one and only Alex Webster. He's a founding member and bass player for death metal legends. I call them legends, man. Cannibal Corpse. And they've got the new album, Violence Unimagined, produced by the band and Erik Rutan, who is now the guitar player for the band as well. Alex, thanks so much for joining us here on the Loaded Radio podcast, dude. Big fan.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I am really, really excited about the new album. I mean, 15 studio albums in now. Now, the addition of Erik Rutan, I think, as an official member of the band is so cool and exciting, dude. I mean, obviously, with him being a touring player with you since 2019, was it the natural choice just to simply go to Erik, or was there like a thought of some other people, or what was the whole process there?
I mean, Erik was for sure the first choice, and we're super happy that it all worked out for that reason. I mean, yeah, he was our number one choice. We've just known him for so long and worked with him on so many of our albums. Yeah, so we've had this professional and personal relationship that goes back for a long ways, you know, many years. And then we just know how killer he is at what he does. You know, you can't really find a more experienced death metal guitar player. There's a handful of other guys out there that have similar level of experience, but nobody has more experience, really. You know, from Ripping Corpse to Morbid Angel and Hate Eternal, there was no question that he would be a killer addition to the band if that's what was going to end up happening, and it did. So we're really happy he joined, you know, and super stoked about how everything's shaping up and stoked for the future.
Well, Alex, was it simply like just going into the studio and asking him to join, or was there like some kind of long drawn out process there? Or
well, we had done the touring with him. You know, he toured with us as a temporary guy for 2019, and by the end of 2019 and into early 2020, it became clear that we were going to want him to just join. Right. So we asked him, and he said yes. And by that point, it was, you know, he'd been playing with us for a year, so it was not much of a jump for him to just join permanently.
Sure.
He was already, and you know, even before he had played with us in 2019, like I said, we have this history to where he was really already part of the family. So it was just like he joined and took on an additional role. But he already was sort of part of the Cannibal Corpse family, you know?
And it's sort of like you've got a built-in producer now too, which is great.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's really up to Erik whether or not he wants to keep wearing all these different hats in our band. He's used to doing that with Hate Eternal. And in fact, in Hate Eternal, he wears even one more hat, which is that of the vocalist.
Right.
You know, so he does a lot. He's used to doing a lot of different things and having a lot of responsibilities. So it's up to him. I mean, we love working with him as a producer, and if he wants to keep doing it, that's probably the way we're going to keep doing things. I'd say for sure, at least for the next album after Violence Unimagined, we'll keep it going the same way, you know, with Erik being the producer. But it's kind of up to him because he's the one doing now. With him doing multiple jobs like this, he's doing the most work out of any of us for sure. You know, he also wrote 3 songs completely for the new album, lyrics and music, which that's a lot of work too. So, he's doing a lot of work. So it's kind of up to him about the production, if he wants to keep doing it or what.
And, you know, you're talking about how he contributed with the writing and just even the writing process for Violence Unimagined. Is it like you and Rob and Erik convening as a group, or is it like, you know, obviously with what we've been going through the last year and a bit now, I mean, was it just sort of like doing stuff at home and sending it to each other? Like, how was the writing process for the album?
It was, most of the music got written before the pandemic really started to, you know, become more serious. Like, we were pretty much done with the actual music composition by March of 2020. Okay. And there were lyrics left to be done, but the music was pretty much done. And we did it the way we've been doing it for a while, which is, individual guys will work on riffs and put together entire songs at home on their own, and then present it to the rest of the band. And we've been doing it that way for quite a few years now. In the very early years of the band, we used to jam together and sort of build songs together, but it turned into more, like one guy writes his songs, the other guy writes his, and then they end up all kind of having a unifying thread in that it's all of us, we're all performing these songs. Yes. So, you'll have George's vocals on all of them, Paul's drumming on all my bass, et cetera. It ends up, even though there's different writers, it all sounds like Cannibal Corpse. Yeah. So there's that. Yeah.
Certainly, man. Now, the first single I've heard, Humane Harvest, it's just brutal. It's just driving. It's polarizing corpse, man. I just love it. Tell me about that song.
Well, that's one that Rob wrote, and
nice.
It's about, as far as I know, it's about the illegal and forcible collection of organs from unsuspecting victims. I think that's what it's about, but you'd need Rob to really get into detail on that, on the lyrics anyhow. Yeah. And the music, we just thought it was just it's just a really killer song, and it has a lot of, different tempos in it, really killer slow section in the middle. Yeah. So, it just seemed like a good one to start everything off with, is in terms of promoting the album. And having said that, all 10 of the other songs sound quite different from that one. They're all really pretty unique. Each song sounds different from the next. And I think you'll find that when you listen to the album from start to finish, that there's not, I think there's not a lot of repetition. There's a whole lot of different ideas from song to song. So
it's not like we're getting another like Red Before Black or another Kill here. This is something significantly, you'd say maybe different kind of a flavor?
If anything, for sure, the album it's most closely resembling would be Red Before Black, pretty much just because it's the album we wrote after Red Before Black. So, the band develops gradually over the years. So the albums that are most like one another are the ones next to each other, usually in the timeline. And with Red Before Black, we had really kind of stripped down our arrangements a bit. Mm-hmm. Things were a little bit less overtly technical on that album, I would say. There's still some very hard stuff to play on it, but it was more about the songwriting. And not that we haven't always focused on songwriting, but it really, we really kind of focused on a stripped down kind of songwriting, a little bit more straightforward arrangements on Red Before Black. And that continued on with a lot of the writing for Violence Unimagined. I think they're both some very catchy albums. And so that's the idea, though, to have a bunch of songs that are really catchy, but also really have their own individual character. That's what makes the album interesting, I think, is that you can sit down and listen to however long it is, like 40 minutes or so, and you're not hearing one song that sounds like another. All 11 of these songs for Violence Unimagined are pretty different from each other.
That's great. And I think that's one thing that Cannibal Corpse has always been able to really do really well, is just deliver those sort of songs that resonate and they stick out. You can tell the difference between Cannibal Corpse songs. That's why I love going to the shows, because when I hear George just growl out the next song title, it's just like that surge of energy and that excitement, it's just awesome.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's intentional that there's that kind of variety between the songs in both the set list and on the albums. When we started the band, if you look back at our early catalog, I'm still really proud of those albums too, but there's an awful lot of songs from our first few albums that are the same speed as one another. And over the years, we did try to mix things up a bit tempo wise, and as far as using maybe different scales for one song than we did for another, or different rhythmic patterns, things like that. If you're going to do 15 albums, which Violence Unimagined is our 15th album, you're going to want to figure out a way to create some musical diversity in there, really have lots of peaks and valleys in the album. Yeah. And hopefully we accomplish that with Violence Unimagined. And when we're thinking of live sets, we do the same thing too. A couple fast ones and then a slow one, then maybe a mid-tempo one, then another fast one, that sort of thing.
15 albums in now, and we're talking very little airplay or support from radio. And Corpse has become the greatest selling death metal band of all time, or some say the greatest of all time, of course. What is it about Cannibal Corpse that you think really seems to resonate with fans so much?
I think part of it's our consistency. We've tried to be consistent across the board in terms of how we present the band. I mean, we've always used Vince Locke for our album covers, or artwork that's associated with the album, that sort of thing. Vince has really kept the visual presentation of our albums very consistent over the years. And we've been pretty consistent about the lyrics too. They're not all gore, but they're all horror or violent. You know what I mean? So there is a little bit of variety. And ditto for the music too. It's all death metal. A good lot of it is really fast, but some of it's slow. There's, those musical ups and downs I was talking about in the last question. So yeah, I think overall we've stayed consistent. When you do see the band play live, you can see us play songs from any point in our career, and they all sit well next to each other in the live set. Maybe not every band that's been around for 3 decades can say that. A lot of bands change more drastically, and that's fine too, by the way, but that's just not what we wanted to do. We really kind of wanted to stay within some self-created borders.
Thank God.
And it seemed, if any of us in the band want to do something that's just not appropriate for Cannibal Corpse, well, that's what side projects are for.
Exactly.
That's the way we've always looked at it. We never wanted to add anything that wasn't part of what we originally intended the band to be, which is a horror-oriented death metal band,
Yeah, and it's really cool just looking back at the history of you guys. I mean, of course, 15 studio albums, we got live albums, you got box sets, everything. But going back even to the early days, I recently interviewed Jack Owen, who one time played with you guys. And of course, Jack going back to Beyond Death. And I asked him about those early days of Cannibal. And what are your feelings about when you reflect back on those early days? I mean, with that first lineup and when you first started working with Chris, looking back at those days, what are your feelings involved there?
I mean, we were just also young, it was fun, it's very exciting. And we had no idea what the future held for us. That's for sure.
Sure.
But yeah, we were just learning. It's all, I mean, we're still learning, but back then we were really inexperienced, like going to do Eaten Back to Life. We'd never been in a big studio to record a full album before. We'd been in smaller studios back in the Buffalo, New York area, but never in a big professional studio like Morrisound. So everything was just so exciting. There were so many firsts. A lot of kind of landmark sort of things happened to us in those early years. You know what I mean? Things that stand out, like the first tour. I remember the first tour pretty well, that we toured Europe with Loud Blast in 91. So there's a lot that's been forgotten, of course, because it's been decades, but there's lots of little landmark things that happened your first time in Morrisound, first tour, that sort of thing, that are still quite memorable.
I remember I asked Jack this question as well. Were you guys aware of what you were doing back then? I'm sure at the time it seemed like you were just a bunch of guys, in the Buffalo area trying to make something. And it's just looking back at the significance of that now. Can you believe that?
Oh, like I said, we could never have predicted it. That we'd be a band that was around for decades like this.
Sure.
Because we started in 1988, right? So look, 20 years prior, heavy metal itself was just being born, right? With Black Sabbath.
1970. Yeah.
So we were in a subgenre of fairly new, like maybe 5-6 years old, depending on when you consider death metal to have begun, maybe with Death's Demos or Possessed Seven Churches or something.
Sure.
The music we were playing was a new subgenre of a kind of music that had itself only been around for 20 years. Right. So to try and envision a 30 plus year career, that is beyond anything that we ever could have imagined. That's for sure.
How do you feel that Jack is actually working with Chris Barnes again? He joined 6 Feet Under.
That's cool, man. I mean, I'm sure they're having a great time jamming together again. So, it's killer.
I don't know if you heard the new album or not, but it's got some of this old, I'd say, echoes of early Corpse, which is kind of cool.
Well, yeah. I mean, Jack's got a really distinct writing style, and he's got a great groove. So yeah, I heard some of the album. I haven't heard the whole thing, but yeah, there's some cool grooves on there, and the rest of the band too. I really like Jeff's bass playing as well. Jeff Hewell's bass playing. Yeah. Marco's a killer drummer. So yeah, it's a cool band, and it sounds really good. You like the music,
Yeah. Is there still communication with Chris at all? Do you guys talk at all?
I haven't talked to him in a while, no. But Jack, I saw 2019. Yeah.
Oh, did you? Oh, cool. So there's still some communication with past members then.
Yeah. Like once in a while, like with Jack or Chris.
Cool, man. Just looking at George now, getting into George. I mean, I think George is one of the greatest frontmen and just in the genre, hands down. Is George heavily involved in the songwriting process? I mean, I'm talking musically.
No, George doesn't really get involved with the writing.
Oh, he doesn't, hey?
No. George is, he sings and he loves to sing for us, but he's always. I mean, he wrote a little bit for some lines for Vile and some for Gallery of Suicide, but he kind of he prefers to let us do that part of it, and he just loves to perform, and he does an awesome job at that. Yeah.
Yeah, he's just so fantastic at it.
Yeah, he's killer.
And you yourself, man, I mean, your bass playing style it's very unique. I mean, you got that like 3-finger gallop thing. There's no pick going on. Not really common in the genre, but it works really well with you. I mean, was that a conscious decision to avoid picks at all costs for you or what?
I mean, first of all, there's a bunch of awesome pick bass players like David Ellefson and
there is, yes.
D.D. Verney. There's all kinds of great pick players. Jason Newsted.
Yep.
Tons, So really, I don't want to look down on that kind of playing. I mean, it's still hard to do and it sounds awesome. But having said that, I've wanted to play with my fingers. I had messed around with a pick a little bit well before Cannibal Corpse got together, and it just wasn't for me. I always really preferred playing with fingers. So with Cannibal, I've been fingers the whole time. That's just how I play. I mean, I wouldn't be able to play well with the pick anyway. Fingers that's just how I play. So, but I don't have anything against pick style playing. It's just not for me. I like to be able to, play with my fingers. It just like the being able to have that kind of contact with the string. I don't know. For me, that's just the way to do it.
It's a comfort thing. It's a preference thing, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think with, the difference is that you can really hear the difference between somebody's fingers. Like, let's say, Steve DiGiorgio or Jeff Huell from 6 Feet or me. You give all three of us the exact same thing to play. Mm-hmm. Well, it's even if we all three of us execute it correctly, because we're all three of us finger style guys, it'll sound different. You'll hear the hand.
Absolutely. You hear the flesh.
Yeah. Where with a pick, it's not always as easy to hear the differences between players. If let's say all three of us were pickers, it would be harder, I think, to hear the difference because, and again, this is not a blanket statement, I mean, but it does take away maybe some of the ability to make it sound like you when it's with a pick. Like you can really hear the individual player that much more when it's finger style, in my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree with you too. And being a player, I completely agree with that. Now, do you think that the band is still catching heat and controversy as much as it was in the early days? I mean, are you guys still banned from playing certain places?
There's certain places where we probably never could have played, places with really strict religious governments and that sort of thing. But like in Germany, for example, we've had problems there and we get to play there, but there's certain songs we're not supposed to play. Yeah, strange. It is strange because
there's some of the bands that come out of Germany, I mean, like it's strange.
Yeah. There's a lot of, I mean, it is strange. Yeah. Because you have a very, socially liberal society there, really.
Certainly,
and for them to have censorship like this, it's unexpected. There's certain places you would expect it, perhaps, like we've had some trouble in Russia and they're known to be a bit more conservative there. So it's less surprising, I guess. And let me think, where else have we had trouble recently?
The southern states, have you been okay down there?
Oh, it's fine. Yeah.
Oh, good.
America is pretty wide open. We've never really had trouble. I think once way back in the 90s, we had to cancel or we had to move a show in West Virginia.
Oh, did you?
We're talking like 25 years ago or so. I think it was back when Chris was in the band. I think we had to move a show. Right. It might have been George's first U.S. tour with us or something. It's a long time. But the show had to be moved outside of the city limits because the local government didn't want us there. It was Wheeling, West Virginia, if I'm not mistaken.
It's great publicity, though, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're still around, so all the censorship efforts have been unsuccessful. Like I'd say. Ultimately, they have not succeeded. We're still doing what we do. I truly, I think that if these people that try to censor us had a better idea of where we're coming from as artists, they wouldn't even bother. Mm-hmm. But they don't know enough about this kind of music and how we approach it to understand that we're not trying to promote violence. Bottom line, we are not trying to say that the stuff that's happening in our lyrics is cool or anything like that at all. We approach it the same way guys who make horror movies do, or people who write horror novels or make, horror comic books or whatever. It's the same thing. It's fictional horror. But I can see, I guess, where someone from a different generation or someone who knows nothing about death metal might, take issue with it. It's understandable.
Well, I think, again, it's a case of judging a book by its cover, especially some of the album covers, right? Getting a lot of heat for that.
Yeah. I mean, you
like
judge
Back to Life.
Sure. Yeah. I remember when I first saw that cover, I remember Chris bringing it up to the practice area where the practice room, and just looking at it, I thought, wow, that cover's amazing. I was like, I would buy that album. That would get my attention, so did. I was, it's certainly the work Vince Locke did for us on the covers. It's, he's done such amazing stuff for us throughout our career. And it really helped, especially back then when we didn't have, there wasn't really an internet to speak of in 1990. Right. I wasn't aware of it. That's for sure. No. And, so all you really had to go by was that album cover when you went into a record store and you look at it, you look at the album, and if the cover looks cool and the picture of the band, maybe one of the guys is wearing a shirt of a band you like, that would have to be, that's all the information you got most of the time, unless you happen to have a great college radio station or something like that in your area that helped you learn about new music. Otherwise, you just had to guess, plunk down your $12 to $15 or whatever it was, and get your album, and hopefully it was as good as it looked, because looks were all you had to go by. So, exactly. Having these awesome covers by Vince, they've gotten us in some censorship trouble, but it also really helped, I think, draw people in and get them interested in our music.
But you've also got a fossil marine worm species named after you. I mean, how does that feel? And did they devour human flesh, or like
I don't know that much about it. You'd have to ask Mats Eriksson and Luke Perry and the other guys who worked on that fossil for the finer details of it. But yeah, it was some ancient monster worm that would
that's cool.
That had these ferocious jaws. It's this really cool looking thing. And so for those guys to name it for me, they've done that with some other fossils too. Named them after other metal artists that they like. It's a huge honor. I'm so thankful to those guys for that. And actually I played on a song about the worm as well. On a project called La Grind Dance Macabre. And
that sounds
just
awesome.
Just look that up. It's a really cool song.
I will.
Yeah, and Mats and Thomas from a guy named Thomas from the band Seance, who you may or may not know from Sweden. He was the one who wrote the song, and they put this all together. And me and Ross Dolan and Moises from Chrysian are also guests on this song. Oh, and that's about that. It's about that worm, so it's really cool. It's those Mats and those guys are great, and I'm honored to be a part of this whole thing. Really cool.
I've definitely got to check that out, and our listeners do as well. Now, a final question for you is: what do you think of bands like Cannabis Corpse, who obviously borrowed heavily from the band name? Did you see it as a tribute, or? Yeah,
definitely. I mean, they approached us right when they were getting the whole thing going and asked us if it was cool to do. I mean, they've always been very respectful of us, and they're an awesome band. Those guys can play their asses off. They're just a super heavy band in their own right. And, they started off parodying our song titles and our old school style,
right?
But it was a parody only in as much as, they were goofing on the song titles. The music that they make is no joke. What I mean?
No, it ain't, man.
That shit's heavy. So, check out Cannabis Corpse too. Great band.
Alex, I can't thank you again enough for your time, man. It's just been awesome talking to you.
Yeah, likewise, man. Thanks so much for the interview, and thanks again for having me, man. And hope you enjoy the rest of the album when it comes out. So,
me too, man.
Anyway, thanks again, man, and hopefully see you soon.
Yeah, Alex, all the best. Take care of yourself.
Thanks, man. You too. Take care.
And there you have it, man. About 30 minutes with Alex Webster from Cannibal Corpse. And just cannot wait when those guys are back on the road again, man. I miss going to Cannibal Corpse shows. But yeah, as I was saying off the top of the podcast this week, it is now a weekly kind of a thing, man. Expect a new podcast weekly, courtesy of Loaded Radio. And it's an all new podcast with tons more stuff in it. Yeah, just great content. And thanks for hanging out and checking it out again this week, okay? Thanks again going out to Alex Webster from Cannibal Corpse. Don't forget the new album is called Violence Unimagined, and I think we could all use some new Cannibal Corpse right now, right? Don't forget, check out loadedradio.com for all your hard rock and metal news daily as well. The 24-hour stream there for you, and just tons and tons of stuff. So yeah, loadedradio.com. Go in there on your mobile, your computer, whatever, tablet. We're always just a click away, and right there at loadedradio.com. All right, I'm Scott Penfold, and we will talk to you again next week on the next edition of the Loaded Radio podcast.
Loaded Radio.